did we stand in America? Why did we stand in America?
Good morning. I'm Dr. Mary Byrne, and my co-host Lynn Morris is not here today, but I'll give you an update on him in just a bit. Today is Wednesday, June 19th, and we have two special guests here from Arc of the Ozarks. We have Tim Digon, he's the Executive Vice President, and Jamie McGranahan, Autism Resource Specialist. We're going to be talking about services and programs these difference makers have for families who have family members, children up through adults, that have developmental disabilities. And we're going to focus on autism today. But I do want to first give you the update on Lynn. Spoke with him this morning. As you might have heard from previous sessions, Lynn had been bitten on the foot by a brown recluse spider. And he developed a condition that required amputation of his foot. And I can tell you that now because I spoke with him, and he's out of the hospital. He's now in Mercy Rehab. He has about 7 days to go with this rehabilitation. I hope we do a show talking about what those difference makers meant to him. And the idea of having a change to your physical makeup that may or may not change your identity with yourself. And I think that's what I admire about Lynn. Nothing's going to change his attitude that God's in control. He's a child of God. And this is just an event in his life that's going to give him a whole new vista. So thanks, Lynn, for this opportunity to fill in for you. Thank you for arranging this interview with the people from Arc of the Ozarks. And I want to share with you, before we get started, our sponsors that support Lynn and this ministry. First, we're going to talk about Brad Pistow at Trinity Insurance and Financial Services. Brad has been a longtime supporter of Lynn, wherever he's broadcast from about current events and issues. And Brad's number is 417-581-9222. So if you're interested in your financial planning, especially for retirement, please give a call to Brad Pistow. Another longtime supporter is Springfield Nissan and Springfield Kia. And Lynn has raved about the services from Springfield Nissan and Springfield Kia. Their number is 417-882-3838. We thank you for your continued support and look forward to when Lynn can be back and tell our audience more about his experiences with your companies. In the meantime, before we get started, I want to introduce you to two people I've just met, but there's an immediate bond among people who have worked with people with disabilities. I was a teacher of the deaf. That's what my doctorate is in, special education. And I was asking Tim to share what prompted him to enter the field, because so many of us are identified as family members or friends who have grown up around people with disabilities, and we go into the field. That's not my story. My story was really my love for language and reading, and what I wanted to share with children who were having challenges in that area. And I ended up in speech pathology and then became a teacher of the deaf. Tim, you were kind of similar in that it was no connection prior to going to college. Tell us more about your background.
So I came to from Wyoming, way from Wyoming. To
Right.
Get, didn't want to stay in Wyoming, so I went to Evangel.
Those
and-
winters
yeah,
up there.
the winters are rough. Beautiful mountains, great in the summer, but yeah, it's rough winters. So I came to Springfield to go to Evangel, and I wanted to work while I was there. I always worked throughout high school, and I found a job posting at a building right behind Evangel called the Ark of the Ozarks. So I went and applied for what is called a DSP, a direct support professional. Those individuals work with individual disabilities in the homes. They work with their personal plans. They work on life skills. Sounded like a great idea for me, so I applied and started working and absolutely fell in love with it. I remember my first shift, I was working with a 14-year-old young man who had been through like 15 or 16 different placements in his life already.
A
And
foster child?
yeah, he went through foster homes as well as different placements with, like the ARC. And the ARC was his 17th placement in his 14 years of life.
Wow.
So my heart immediately broke for him, and I said, why aren't more people doing things to help individuals that live a life like this? And he definitely had some rough edges. He'd been through a lot. He'd been tremendously abused and neglected on top of having a disability. And I just fell in love with what I could do in my capacity to help him achieve more in life. And from that point on, I went and got my master's in counseling psych, and then I started moving up the chain at the ARC. And to this, it's obviously been my favorite job, but something that's been life-changing for me. It's given me a whole new perspective, not only on life, but on raising kids. I have 3 girls now, and on what it really truly means to have opportunities. Sometimes I think we're spoiled in this country with opportunities, but we forget about people who've come from situations where they have not had many opportunities to do much at all. And just falling in love with the idea that you can help someone get greater opportunities, and you can pour yourself into their life and help them become something that they never thought they could be.
Right. That's something you learn when you enter the field, is that children with disabilities are actually targeted for abuse. They can't advocate for themselves. They can't fight back. They're a very vulnerable population, and it really, you understand the mercy of God and what it means to be an agent for Him when you take care of the vulnerable.
Absolutely.
And what we're going to talk about is that you don't take care of them to make them dependent on you. You show them how to be the fullest self that they can be, and that's it's a blessing to watch that happen.
It is. It really is.
So Jamie, tell us about you.
So I entered the disability field by my child. My husband and I met the first day of college. We fell in love. We got married just right after we met. Clay was in the ministry. I was a music theater major, and we took a church in North Missouri. So we moved away from our family, and I found out I was going to have a baby, and I was like, yay, I'll take a little break from school, and we'll have this baby, and then I'll go back to school. And that baby was Connor. And when Connor
A
was
good Irish
born-
name.
Yes, yes. Connor McGranahan. Yes, we got it all covered. When Connor was born, he was a typical kid, sweet little baby. But as things began to progress and develop, we saw things that were different about Connor. And in 93, 94, the world was different, and words like autism and developmental disabilities really weren't prevalent in conversations. So we had found out I was going to have another baby. So we have our daughter, Austin, and the kids are 22 months apart. She is the best therapy I ever purchased for Connor. She's the most expensive therapy, but she's wonderful and amazing. And so as we progressed with Connor and began our journey, it wasn't until he was 5 that we received the diagnosis of autism with Connor, and then at 7 that he was deaf. And so I didn't go back to school and finish that music theater degree. I stayed home to take care of both of my kiddos' needs. And then, as we progressed, I entered back into the workforce. I worked as a family advocate for the Department of Mental Health on a private contract.
That'll do it. Personal experience.
Sure does. Sure does. I knew exactly what everybody was going through because we were going through it too. And after that, then I worked for the Department of Mental Health, and then for our Senate Bill 40 board in Greene County, Abilities First. And then I got to come and join the ARC with the new Autism and Neurodevelopmental Center. But Connor is 31. And he has an amazing life. I'm here today with the approval of Connor to share about him and his life, but he is the driving force for Clay and I. All four of the McGranahans work and live in the disability community as professionals and as people that receive services, and it's changed our life, but it's made us who we were supposed to be.
Yeah, I have to say that as a young single adult who became a teacher of the deaf, it was watching the parents of my students advocate for their children that I learned, because I'm the oldest of 6. We didn't have children with disabilities, and my parents were good parents, but I have to say they didn't have the work in raising us that I watched parents of kids with disabilities do.
Sure.
And it wasn't just home intervention. It was the advocacy work.
Yes.
And now I would say all parents have to do that. and they should be taking their cues from people like you.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
It's, 80% of marriages in the autism community end in divorce or
Yeah.
separation. We are very fortunate and blessed. Clay is just as active in our roles of raising Connor as I was. And he often says that we're like Mac Incorporated. We just work sometimes as a business, sometimes as an agency to make sure everything is met. And we really redefine success at a young age. And so, you have that moment as a parent where you're sitting in your car and you're going, well, which way am I going to go here? And so it's been something that we have enjoyed and challenged, and so it's awesome to get to give back to families and show them that road.
Yeah, your dreams change.
Yeah,
Your
definitely.
perception of what success is does change.
Sure.
But it becomes more centered on what it means to be a human being. Yeah. See, we talk the same language. That's great. So tell us more about the Arc of the Ozarks and what you do there.
Yeah, the ARC is a not-for-profit. It was founded in 1964 by parents who wanted services for their kids in the local area.
Advocacy
Yes.
again, yeah.
Unfortunately, it was commonplace in the 50s and 60s when a child was diagnosed with a disability to be sent off to an institution for care, and that's not care at all. So, the 3 visionaries that founded the ARC, 3 parents said, we want to create services here, and they started with a small EdRec program. But from that point forward, we've grown tremendously. We have about 1,700 staff between Kansas City, Springfield, Monett, and Joplin. We provide services as early intervention and autism services all the way through 24/7 long-term services supports. So we serve, over 5,000 individuals with disabilities in varying capacities. We have an EdRec program. So we do a summer camp program that's very popular. It's going on now. That's been actually since the inception of the ARC has been around. We do 24/7 residential services, so individuals who need 24/7 type care with, go ahead.
For what age groups do you have these residential services?
Residential, usually 14,
Okay.
sometimes young as 14 through the lifespan.
Mm-hmm.
We do in-home supports, a SOAR program for day services, so that individuals would come 9 to 3 and do various activities, learning
Great.
skills. It's a very cool program. And then we also have specialized programs. We'll have our Autism and Neurodevelopment Center, which we'll talk about here in a minute.
Mm-hmm.
We have a school for autism called Rivendale. Rivendale supports up to 20 students in an educational capacity, but they also focus on life skills. And we contract with local school districts for individuals who have significant needs.
That's what I was wondering,
Yeah.
how you interfaced with the school. So
Yeah.
you are a setting that a family's IEP for their student
Correct.
may find as the least restrictive environment because it's what's best for the education of that child.
Exactly. Yeah, and
Yes.
our end goal is to help the individual improve enough behaviorally. We have behavior analysts embedded in the program as well as specialists to go back to their home school district to graduate. That's our end goal with that program. And then we do our family advocacy program. So anyone who has questions about how to get connected, our field is very confusing. How to get connected, to get the right services. So we have a family advocacy program that is free of charge to anyone who calls the ARC and wants to get connected on how do I get services, what do services look like for my child, and that's a very, very cool program. But yeah, the ARC, our mission is to support individuals with disabilities in directing their own lives as valued members of the community, and we believe that from the moment that we do diagnostics for a child with autism, for individuals who need services lifespan. So that's really what the ARC is. Anything disability related, we provide, basically.
Yeah, I've always been an advocate for the whole continuum of placement services because some children, although inclusion is often talked about as the goal, some children's outbursts and negative behaviors is triggered by the anxiety created by being in large group. So the true thing they need is a smaller group setting, if group at all.
Right.
And sometimes they can grow into a situation where they're able to handle their anxiety and gradually be placed in the larger group. But yeah, you need the full continuum.
You do.
And it's a wonderful thing. So, Jamie, how long have you been at the ARC, and tell us what you do?
I actually joined the ARC in January.
Of this year?
Of this year, yeah, I'm new. But I've been around and interacted with the ARC for my 20 plus years and professionally. And so my title is Autism Resource Specialist. I am at the new center.
That means all things to all people.
Yeah.
I know.
Titles are not important to me. You can just call me the person that somebody comes and talks to. That works too. So I'm at the new center, and my role is really to help everybody navigate that process,
Right.
whether it be when they come the very first time to begin a diagnostic process, or when it's an older person that's looking for services or supports, or even working with the professionals to support them. So just finding what is out there and finding how it can make a difference for people.
Yeah, and that's what's interesting about the center that you just talked. If it's not out there, you build it.
Right.
Absolutely.
Right? And that's
Right.
how the Arc of the Ozarks got started in the first place.
Yeah.
If it's not there, let's build it. So tell us about the new center you have.
Yeah, we knew there was a big need for additional autism diagnostic as well as therapy services. We joined with Missouri State University and Mercy about 8 or 9 years ago to kind of form a coalition to see how we could help solve some problems. The prevalence rate right now for autism in the U.S. is 1 in 36. There's like a 317% increase from 2000.
How did that happen?
It's a good question. I don't think anyone knows the answer. There was some changes to the DSM-5 that expanded the criteria. Changed the criteria to autism spectrum disorder instead of autism, as well as.
So even the high-functioning Asperger would be included in that population.
Correct. Yeah. So, but I can tell you personally, we know there's a significant increase in the ARC programs, especially education recreation program, where we have a lot of kids coming into services. We know there's a drastic increase. We used to have maybe 1 or 2 kids with autism in that program. Now we have over 50% of individuals on that with autism.
Yeah. What's interesting is that I taught the full spectrum of kids with special needs, including gifted, and there was an assumption that if you were gifted, you were perfect. And nobody really entertained twice exceptional, where you were gifted and had a disability. And Asperger was kind of the classic disability associated with giftedness. So that social skills were almost a signature for these kids who were identified as gifted. And there are special programs for gifted children who need concentration on social skills, because they're not included either. So, we have to open wide the idea of human need, and maybe these labels help us categorize so that we can get money for services. But in reality, we're all part of the human family.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. So our goal with that center, we knew there's a big need in Springfield.
Yeah.
In Missouri alone, there'll be 40,000 children in this decade identified as having autism.
That's what I wondered. What's the geographic area that your facility serves?
Yeah, right now our facility serves Southwest Missouri.
Oh.
There are 6 state-funded autism centers throughout the state of Missouri. There are 3 in St. Louis, one in Kansas City, one in Columbia, one in Southeast, and then one in Northeast. I'm sorry. So there are 6 that cover Missouri, but there's not enough need.
Are
especially
they
in
all
Springfield.
linked with the ARC?
No. They're just get services through the state of Missouri and some funding to help.
Judavine, that sort of? No.
No, not Judavine. They're one is like Mercy Kids in St.
Oh,
Louis.
okay.
If people for like the one in Columbia, a lot of people have Thompson Center.
Okay.
Our goal was to create a center like that that's holistic, that provides excellent diagnostics as well as ongoing therapies for kids with autism. But we serve right now Southwest Missouri.
Okay. Very good. Because I did see a chart, I think I have it here, of Joplin, your Joplin area.
Yeah. We do serve individuals in Joplin with therapies. Our main center.
You go there, they come here. How does that
Yeah,
work?
I'll kind of explain how that works. So we opened our Autism and Neurodevelopmental Center on January 2nd of this
Right.
year. That was years in the making. We received a $5 million one-to-one matching grant to get it off the ground for capital improvements, investment, as well as getting it off the ground. So our goal was to create 500 multidisciplinary diagnostic assessments per year. That's what we're on target for now. As well as ongoing therapies ranging from physical therapy, speech and language therapy, feeding therapy, occupational therapy, physical counseling for families as well as kids on the spectrum, and therapeutics, psychiatric support, including medication management and interventional psychiatry, which we can talk about in a minute. So we created this center to provide all that in one location. So our center in Springfield is about 500 multidisciplinary assessments per year, which means that there'll be a psychologist leading the assessment, but we will include speech, ABA, applied behavior analysis, sometimes occupational therapy, and sometimes psychiatry, depending on the need of the child, to make sure that we do a good differential diagnosis. So we know.
Is the new doctor you just hired as director a psychiatrist?
Dr.
Is that
John,
right?
our medical director, yeah, he's a psychiatrist. He operates that clinic, child psychiatrist. And then we provide all those ongoing therapies. We also have satellite clinics because we know that we're serving Southwest Missouri. People can drive for an assessment for a day.
Right.
But to bring therapy to their area and they need it, we want to do that. So we provide outpatient therapy in Branson, Hollister area. We have it in Springfield as well as Joplin. Our end goal is to create additional outpatient therapy clinics throughout Southwest Missouri so we can bring therapies to the communities of need.
All right, very good. So what was the impetus? You said the new clinic was years in the making. What was the impetus that launched the idea?
Yeah, I think just the need. Our family advocacy office, actually, we were getting constant phone calls saying, hey, we cannot get assessed. We're on the Thompson Center. We're waiting for 2 years for an assessment. 3-year-old child waiting 2 years. And oftentimes it's a barrier because you have to have that diagnosis to be able to get access to therapies and services. And that's very, very unfortunate because we know the first 5 years of our lives are the most important.
Yeah.
They're the most formative parts of our life. And our brains are most sensitive to change.
Right.
So getting early therapies is incredibly important. And to get that, you have to have a diagnosis. So we knew we had to step up to the plate. Burl does great work here with their autism center. They provide a couple hundred assessments per year, but it's not enough. We know that there's more needed. So we felt an incredible burden in a good way to start this and get it going for families in this area.
Yeah, and that's what I like hearing from you. It's always about supporting the
Yeah.
families. And so how do you interact with them to find their goals for their child?
Yeah, and Jamie can definitely step in here. That's in her wheelhouse. But one of the things we do with our center is a little bit different than others. We provide for services for kids and adults. Most centers only provide service for kids. We know kids with autism become adults with autism. They still need support.
That's right.
But to help families, we have a family advocate sitting every meeting. So once the whole diagnostic process concludes, there's a parent-family meeting with the evaluator as well as a family advocate to get them connected to services. But Jamie definitely can speak to how that works.
Well, let's go, Jamie.
Yeah. So a family comes in for an assessment, and they have been on a waiting list, whether it's 2.5 years or 6 months. And so they've waited, and then they've, in our office, then they meet with a social worker. And so that social worker does some pre-evaluation, kind of gains some family knowledge there. Then they come in for that evaluation. That evaluation could last up to 4 hours. That's a lot. That's a lot for families to go through that process, but to make sure that we're really getting a great idea for this kid, to give them a diagnosis that may last them lifelong. And so making sure that that's adequate and what they need. And then the family will come back, they'll meet with the psychologist and myself, or part of the family advocacy team. And so the psychologist will explain what autism is, and what that looks like, and how their child met that criteria. And as we talked about the DSM-5, as it has changed, instead of Asperger's, PDD, autism, there are levels. There are 3 levels, and so the psychologist will explain that the levels aren't the level of severity, they're the level of support that that person needs. And that level could change through life, and it could be a level for language that's at this level, and socialization's at a different level. So we explain that to families, and then we talk with the families about resources and what their journey could look like, and meet them where they're at. And so if they've got a 4-year-old, then we're talking about preschool and those needs. If they've got a 12-year-old, we're talking about school and the interventions and the supports that they need. And maybe it's just they need another parent to talk to. So we're talking about what in the community is out there, the support groups, the social groups, the opportunities for those families. And then we have resources that we send them with. And we have this wonderful binder that my counterpart, Elizabeth Obrey, developed. And I am amazed sometimes that families will hug that binder and say, here is what I didn't know existed. And so then my role is, I'm a part of that journey. If they come back to us for therapy, for occupational therapy, for speech therapy, for feeding therapy, I'm there, I'm available. If they just need to know, hey, where is this, where can I find that, then they give me calls. I get lots of random calls, but to get to be a part of that journey for that family. And then we follow up with all of the information that they can find across, the internet and those resources as well, and just kind of see how they're doing. And then our hope and goal is that we can eventually offer parent trainings and opportunities for those families to be able to come back as their child or adult progresses and ages, and find those things that are really what they need to progress in their lifespan.
Yeah. Do you take college internships?
Yes,
So
we
that
have-
students can observe you
Yes.
doing this?
And we have developed an amazing relationship with Missouri State and Drury University, and it's really wonderful to watch those interns come and be a part. We've developed a relationship with Head Start. So Head Start and Missouri State and us are all working to support those kiddos in their Head Start classrooms to find out if they need to come through for a diagnostic interview. So we're working with those universities. What a wonderful opportunity to sit and learn and be a part of all of that.
Well, and to interact with parents right there at
Sure.
the foundation of your education.
Sure.
So that you respect them as the experts, right?
Definitely.
Absolutely.
And I tell families, as I'm going through all of this and I'm sharing with wonderful resources like Echo Autism from the University of Missouri or Autism Speaks, then I will say, but the one person that's going to know where this resource is another parent. So let's
Yeah.
get you connected to some other parents. And that's something in the old days, because I'm older, in the old days, families work together a little more organically than they do today because we have the internet and because we have those resources. But that's part of our goal with the family advocacy group, is to make sure that people are getting connected and they know what's out there and they know what they are looking for their child.
Yeah, particularly with the assessment piece. 4 hours sounds like a long assessment period, but that's nothing like living with the child.
Sure, sure.
And so the person with the largest window for observation is actually the parent.
Right.
And I think we have a kind of a fetish for standardized tools rather than actually engaging with people who are walking the walk.
And one of the great things about the center is there is occupational and speech and physical therapy that can go and follow up with that. There's also therapy like parent-child intensive training. And so we have therapists that can work there in the center. We have the two-way mirrors, and so the therapist can work, the family can work with the child, and the therapist can be in the other room coaching the family as they go through that process.
With the bug in the ear.
Yes, and the BCBAs and the therapist just all working as a whole to meet that family's needs. It's pretty amazing, and it's just starting. I cannot imagine. I hope I'm around to see what 20 years down the road looks like for ARC of the Ozarks and the services that they provide because of what this center does. And it's not just autism. There's so much neurodevelopment needs.
Let's go there.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
so what are the other disabilities that you service?
Sure. So neurodevelopment is a wide chasm. It includes ADHD, autism. It includes speech needs like dyslexia. And neurodevelopment and neurodivergent learners are growing, and that word is something that we all need to be aware of. So there are some kiddos that come to the center for occupational therapy or for speech therapy that we're just going to see for a short time. They're neurodevelopmentally delayed, and we can help with that early intervention to catch them where they need to be. And those services may not need to continue because they've been caught so early. And so neurodevelopment is part of it. And neurodevelopment disorders and diagnosis go right along with autism. It's not you just have autism.
Right.
You can have autism as well as ADHD. And so for those families...
Twice
trying to-
exceptional, right?
Yes, trying to weed all of that out and make those discernments of what does my kiddo need best. It's really amazing to have a center that supports that. And I'm new, and so as I was researching and trying to figure out if this was part of the journey that I wanted to be a part of, I looked across the nation, and there are very few centers that really have this whole person treatment, and then ARC having
For
outside-
lifespan, yes.
and ARC having outside of the center all of the other supports that are available. It's an opportunity for families.
And Mary, we were very intentional to make this, because does differentiate us from other centers in the state as well. Most just serve autism, kids with autism. We were very intentional because of our history with the ARC, and I know just because someone doesn't have an autism diagnosis doesn't mean they need just as much or more intervention or assistance. So that's why this center is neurodevelopmental and developmental. We want to make sure we can help every kid and every family that has a need. And if we can't do it at that center, we'll find a place where we can get you help.
Yeah, so it's a more general phrase rather than an explicit diagnosis. So
Correct.
if you're struggling, we'll support you.
Correct.
Yeah, and you can get away with that in the early childhood years. But then we have to figure this out, right?
Right.
So, yeah, but that's when families need the most support, is when they don't know what's going on.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
So what are the goals, you say, for future growth? You want to develop the center.
Yeah.
You want to enhance your partnerships.
Yeah, I think this center is just a start of bigger things to come. We know right now we have 547 people on the wait list.
Wow.
We opened January 2nd. So we already know that we have to scale up our diagnostic ability, our evaluation ability. So right now we're on pace for 500 per year. We would like to be at some point in the future at 1,000 per year.
Do you see yourself attracting people from a larger geographic area to meet that goal?
No, this is just local.
This is wow.
Yeah, the need is incredible. So we want to scale up our diagnostic ability as well as our therapies, and then we want to be on the cutting edge of future therapies, and we're doing so with interventional psychiatry. We're bringing some new technology to Missouri. The only machine actually in Missouri that will do this service. It's interventional psychiatry. It's a form of TMS called MERT. So we're bringing that actually this summer. And
Could describe the
Yeah.
process a little.
Yeah, so TMS, or transcranial magnetic stimulation, has been around, FDA approved since 2008. What it does, it takes a magnet, kind of like an MRI machine, same type of technology. It will stimulate the brain for various conditions. So it's FDA approved for major depressive disorder, OCD, anxiety, PTSD, and it's been very effective for some people. MERT is a new form of personalized TMS, and what it does is you take an EEG. So you take actually an EEG and EKG before you start treatment. So you measure someone's brain waves in each part of their brain to see where there may be dysfunction. And with their database, they know if certain brain wave patterns are there, it's indicative of like an ADHD, or it's indicative of depression or anxiety. So what they do is they find what is called your intrinsic alpha wave. When you close your eyes for this EEG for 10 minutes, you close your eyes for 10 minutes, they do an EEG, they measure your brainwave pattern. For most people, their alpha wave should be dominant. Their alpha wave is when you're in a relaxed state, eyes closed. You should not have what is called your delta or theta waves present. Those are present during sleep. So delta is very present during like deep wave sleep when you're most at rest, or long waves. Theta is kind of when you're groggy, falling asleep. And then your beta is when you're very active. So you're really solving a problem. You're thinking heavily. That's when your beta waves come into place. So it measures your intrinsic alpha. Your intrinsic alpha is your baseline state. So what they do then, they develop a protocol based on this EEG, and every 2 weeks you'll go through therapy, about 6 to 8 weeks. They take this magnet. It's FDA cleared, not FDA approved, and they found it to be effective for conditions of autism, with PTSD, with anxiety, with depression. They will place the magnet based on your EEG with your personalized alpha and stimulate your brain to create neuroplasticity, neuromodulation, to help kind of break up those old patterns and help you develop new ones. And there's been case studies done, not a lot of randomized controlled trials yet. We hope to do some of those actually here. I can give you one example of a 22-year-old young lady who went in nonverbal, very dysregulated. So she had a hard time going to a store. She was very dysregulated, would get very anxious. She would hand flap, get upset, and had a hard time going to the store. So Dad actually took her in for a MERT for 8 weeks. And for the first 2 weeks, it got worse, and which is kind of common with this type of therapy. But 6 weeks after MERT, she spoke for the first time in her life.
Wow.
And she can go to a store now and is completely fine. She said it's like a different child,
Yeah.
and she's 22.
Yeah.
There's other kids that have been through therapy as young as 6 or 8 and were nonverbal before going through MERT, have learned to utilize language a little bit. They've been much more regulated. And oftentimes, the underlying conditions with, Jamie mentioned earlier, the conditions that come along with autism sometimes, I think over 47% have anxiety or depression. Almost 50% have epilepsy. So there's a lot of conditions that come along with it. And oftentimes with kids with autism, because they sometimes don't have the expressive language skills, they can't really communicate what's going on.
Yes.
So anxiety comes out with behavior.
That's
Depression
right.
comes out with behavior. And
That's
people
right.
misunderstand this. They think it's, they have behavior problems. No, they have an anxiety problem. They can't communicate with you.
Yeah, I remember the one case of a student who had urology problems.
Yeah.
And what she did was take all of her clothes off and have temper tantrums. And she was trying to tell the adults in the room,
Yeah.
I'm in pain.
Yeah.
And you don't sedate a person like that. You take care of the urology
Yeah.
problem.
Exactly.
But I think what I find fascinating in the description of the treatment you're talking about is that it sounds like a parallel to acupuncture. And I have had experience with acupuncture where it's similar. You're doing electric current
Yeah.
intervention in the body to stimulate the brain to say, hey, we have a problem in this area. And it gets worse in the beginning, but then it does get better.
At the core,
Yeah.
our bodies are energy. People, I think we
Yeah.
kind of overcomplicate things sometimes. But
Well, I
and
like drug-free
Yeah.
interventions.
And this
This is what I'm really attracted
it's
to.
non-invasive. It's very safe profile. We hope to get it FDA approved at some point, but it's FDA cleared and then used widely. But really, what it measures is your energy in your brain.
Yeah.
If there's either too
Yeah.
much or not enough in different parts of your brain, and it helps stimulate that to
Yeah.
get it back to where it should be or closer to the norm.
Which gets back to neuro developmental.
Yes.
Right? Let's see. So can you tell me more about the early intervention? So we were talking about adults who have this transformation. What do you see in the young children? Do you see, especially with Head Start, what we would like to see? And the data isn't really wonderful for Head Start in general, but it is very good for children with disabilities because of that neuroplasticity of the brain. That's where you get the biggest effect of that early stimulation. So tell us more. Are you able to get these children that you diagnose early and then transition them into regular kindergarten?
Sure, as we're, it just, wherever the child's need needs to be met. We are looking at going through the diagnostic process. We can start as early as 18 months. Many times at 24 months, we can start that process to reach that diagnosis for that family. But I always encourage families, if you see that there's a delay, if you see that there's a challenge, you don't have to wait for a diagnosis. You can start occupational therapy. You can start physical therapy. Missouri has First Steps.
Mm-hmm.
And First Steps is an amazing program from birth to 3 to meet families and meet kids where they're at and provide services in the home. So we encourage that. But when you start that early intervention, whether it be through the therapies or whether it be through a diagnosis and then connecting with therapies, we know that if we can meet that kid before they're 4 years old and really start that process, it's going to make a difference for when they start kindergarten. And they may need a few supports, but not the same amount of supports that they needed before they started the therapy and those types of things for families. So
And as you transition the child from these early interventions into the grade school, how do you support the receiving teacher?
So all of our assessments have information, suggestions, supports of what will work best for that child in the classroom.
Mm-hmm.
And as well as our OTs and PTs and speech are always willing to collaborate. And we have speech therapists and occupational therapists in the school districts on contracts as well.
Good.
We have developed a relationship with NICSA district as well as Springfield district. So when they see an evaluation that comes across that says the Ozarks Autism and Neurodevelopmental Center, they know what that child received in that evaluation, and they know that that information is there. And we're working on developing relationships with a lot of the other districts as well. So it just goes to stand that we would meet the family where they're at, but the teacher is part of that team. So if they can have that information of what works best for this kid and what therapies the kiddo is responding well to, then that can be a jumping point for the school district.
Yeah, I'm so uplifted by the hope you offer families who were in a state of confusion, not knowing how to meet their child's needs. It wasn't a matter of willingness, it was a matter of information and support. And knowing that Arc of the Ozarks is there, how do parents get in touch with you?
Yeah, there's a number of ways. We have a website called autismcenteroftheozarks.org. There's an easy way to get connected on there virtually. Otherwise, we have a phone number they can call that we can leave with you. But even if they get connected with our main line.
And we can post that on the screen, but feel free to share it now.
Yeah, even if they call our main number, 417-864-7400, they can get transferred over to the Autism Center. Or wherever their need might be.
And if they go on the website, there literally is a button that says Refer My Child. Click that, start the process, and our intake department will take it from there.
Excellent. Well, it's a joy to meet you and to learn more about the services you offer and to count you among the difference makers that we have here on this show. So thank you so much for joining us, and I hope our listeners have a wonderful rest of the day.
Land that we love.